everyone, my name is Katie and I am a fourth year first grade teacher here on YouTube. I love to film vlogs that show just a day or a week in my teacher life, tip videos, some lifestyle content thrown in, all kinds of things. So if you're new to my channel, welcome. I'd love for you to hit that subscribe button so you can follow along. And if you're not new here, thank you so much for joining in for today's video. Today's video has been requested multiple times in many different comments from many different subscribers, so I figured it was finally time to sit down and film a video dedicated to advice for first year teachers. If you're not a first year teacher, you will probably still get some things out of this advice, so feel free to keep watching. And if you know a first year teacher, somebody who's about to start, when we finish, make sure you share this video with them so they can get some tips to help set them up for success in their first year of teaching. I am not an expert teacher by any means, but I will share my experiences and some things that I think would have been helpful to know going into my first year of teaching, or some things I have learned along the way. I'm going to break the advice down into two different categories. The first one is for people specifically who do not have a teaching job yet, but all of the advice in that category applies if you do already know where you're teaching as well. And then the second half is more specific to people who already have their job lined up and are ready to go. So things you can start doing from that point forward. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start the first half. These are tips for people who don't have a job yet, or it still applies to those who do. Tip number one is to be careful what you buy. It is so easy to get carried away spending money, buying things for your classroom, especially when you're so excited for your very first year, your very first space. And so I know the temptation is real, but I would just advise you not to not buy anything, just to be careful and selective with what you purchase. Here are some things that I would recommend getting for sure once you know you're going to be a teacher. If you're job hunting or you know that you need a job, here are some things that I'd say, okay, go ahead and purchase these. Some things that I got were student mailboxes, because I knew no matter what classroom I ended up in, I wanted to have a really good file system for my student mailboxes. So I went ahead and purchased that from Amazon because I knew I'd want to take that with me. And then another thing that I purchased a lot of were storage bins and buckets and scrapbook cases and all of the things that I would use to organize my materials. The truth of the matter is you may have storage in your classroom, but you're probably not going to have bins and all of those things, and you'll want it organized in a specific way. So I went to the Dollar Tree and got some white plastic bins. I have big plastic buckets from Michael's that I bought before my first year teaching, and I have the clear scrapbook cases from Michael's that I bought as well, and book bins, and I have used those every single year of teaching in all of my classrooms in some way, shape, or form. So those are things you will definitely use that you can go ahead and start finding and investing in. Another thing that you can go ahead and start to buy are books. You can never have too many books in your classroom library, and I have definitely accumulated mine over time. So check Facebook Marketplace, check Goodwill bookstores, check for library sales, garage sales, any place you can find to start getting your hands on some books. And you can get a wide range too. If you're not sure what grade you're going to teach, picture books are still great with upper elementary. Chapter books, go ahead and get it. You could do it as a read aloud, or you never know, you might be teaching an upper grade later on down the road. So go ahead and start to collect some books for your classroom library. With that piece of advice as well, every time you get new books, what I started doing my very first year teaching is I would take them home, wipe them down if they were a used book, and then I keep a Google Docs spreadsheet, I guess that would be a Google Sheet, with all of the books in my classroom library, and I just started to organize them by author's last name and by title, and then I put little tags next to them like this one's nonfiction, this one's ocean themed. And that has been a huge lifesaver because I could currently tell you exactly how many books are on my bookshelf. And if somebody came in and said, hey, do you have this book? I can say, I'm not sure, but let me look. And I just check my Google Sheet and I can search it up real quick. That is something that would be super nice to start doing now when you're a first year teacher, because then later on down the road, like fourth year teacher me, if I get a new book, it's really easy just to log one in. But it would have been a daunting process if I thought about doing all of that now, because I've collected so many more books than I had my first year teaching. If you're interested more in what that looks like, I have a whole video on my classroom library organization that I will link in the cards above, and I show you what that spreadsheet looks like so you could start your own. Tip number 2 is to go ahead and start planning out all of your classroom management procedures now. Write every procedure out step by step. And even if you don't have a job or a classroom, like you probably still know the way that you're thinking about doing pencils in your classroom. You probably already know kind of how you want your desks arranged or how you want your students to turn in papers, or at least a good general idea. So I would recommend sit down and walk through a whole day in your mind of school and write down any procedure that you have: bathrooms, pencils, turning in work, using the classroom library, classroom supplies, and type out step by step how you would introduce that to your students. That really gets your brain thinking in school mode and will prepare you so well for the first day of school when you have to teach all of those things to your students if you already have the long list going. Once you find out where you're teaching, you can just adjust it to match the things that your grade level does or to match any school procedures. But if you start thinking about it now, odds are you're going to be able to use a lot of those procedures and those step-by-steps from the get-go. And tip number 3 is start planning your organization. Are you going to use file folders? Are you going to use Google Drive? Are you going to use buckets in the cabinet? How do you want to organize materials? Do you think you want to organize it according to your school's curriculum, which you might not know yet, but that's an option? Do you want to sort it by skill? Like I teach first grade, so I sort a lot of my things by phonics skill. If you teach math, would you want to sort it by topic? Go ahead and start thinking through those things because that can drive what you purchase for organization for your classroom. But also you can start organizing some things that you've collected on the way, because odds are in your student teaching, you got some resources or some materials from your cooperating teacher, or you've already downloaded some things from Teachers Pay Teachers, or you have resources that you've created. So you can go ahead and start to organize those. That way, when you get more, you can add them and organize them the way you'd like. I definitely recommend keeping a Google Drive with everything organized on it. I have folder after folder, so I know where everything is. I can click on resources, reading, phonics, long A, and ta-da, there's everything that I have on long A. But I do still have some things that are in my file folder that I accumulated my first year teaching that were copies from other teachers that they were like, oh, you should use this resource, and I don't have the digital file. So I have a little bit of both, but I would definitely recommend like maybe setting up a Google Drive and taking the things that you have now and putting them in there. That way you kind of feel like you know where things are before you start teaching, and a lot of things get thrown at you because then you'll have a spot for everything. That's the best part. New file? Great. I can put that in my reading resources. New handout? Great. I know which file folder I want to put that in. So just start thinking through that, and if you can, go ahead and start that organization process. Okay, the second category of tips is for once you know you have a job. So if you do, congratulations. That's so exciting for you. You know what you're teaching next year. So here are some next steps that you can start doing to continue to prepare and to get you ready to be a first-year teacher. First tip, as soon as you are able to, look at your school's curriculum for math, reading, science, social studies, whichever subject you're teaching. Go ahead and get your hands on the teacher's edition so you can look through it. I'm telling you right now, and I've told people this year, I wish there was a class in college that exposed you to more curriculums. Like we did a lot of lesson planning, but when you teach, a lot of times the district is like, this is the curriculum that you teach. And I feel like I don't have a lot of experience with picking up a curriculum and looking at all the parts because there's so many pieces. So I wish we had more exposure to that. So definitely get your TE, look through, see how are the units organized? How do they organize it by day, by lesson? What standards do they teach and what progression? See if your district has a pacing guide. Go ahead and get your hands on all of those things because then you're going to have a better idea of like what materials do I already have that are provided through this curriculum. Like if it's a reading curriculum, do they have decodable text? Do they have leveled readers? Do they have read alouds that go with this? Because if you already have a lot of those things, that's going to be great for you as a first year teacher. And then if you realize there's not a lot of those things, that's something to start thinking ahead that you can ask your teammates like, hey, what do I do? What do you guys do for decodable readers? So like get a hand on those materials. If you can, like work through it with another teacher and say, can you just show me give me like an overview of what you use in this teacher's edition so I can understand it better. Next tip is to make sure when you go see your classroom for the first time, you take pictures of everything. And then when you're sitting at home and you're in that like waiting period of we can't move things into our classroom yet, but I've already seen it and I'm excited, you can look through the pictures and map out everything. I did this when I did my classroom setup for this classroom, and I have a whole series on classroom setup, so you can feel free to watch that. Binge watch classroom setup. It's so fun and it's informative. But I did share like my map that I drew, and I drew every cabinet and said, this is the one I want to keep my phonics things in. This is the one I'm going to keep math things in. I'm going to put all my craft supplies in this closet. That way when I moved my stuff in, it was like, boom, that's phonics, that's crafts, that's math. And I knew exactly where I wanted everything, but it took some planning at home, and it was kind of relaxing to do over the summer anyways, especially if you like to organize and you're excited to set up your classroom, which as a first year teacher, you probably are. So that's kind of like a productive way to use some summertime when you can't get into your room yet. Tip number 3, this one applies throughout the whole year. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And that is so hard because I used to be a shy person, and I would still say that I kind of am shy in new situations. So my first year of teaching, I don't want to say it was a struggle, but it was very difficult for me. And I wish I had just gotten up from my desk and walked next door into the classroom next to me and asked more questions when I needed help. I did have a mentor teacher paired, and I did ask her a lot, but I always felt kind of like I was a burden because I kept asking all these questions, and I just felt like I should know these things. Don't feel that way. When in doubt, ask somebody because they're not going to mind helping you. And honestly, now that I'm a 4th year teacher, last year was my 3rd year at a school, and I had another teacher that I was helping, and I loved it when she came and asked me questions. Like, it made my day because I was like, yay, somebody wants to know something and they value what I think. And if I didn't know the answer, I would get it for her. So I would just definitely recommend, don't be afraid to go ask questions. Make a list. Take like 5 questions in at once so you don't feel like you're always going in there every single like, oh, I need to go back. I just went in there to ask a question. Like, write your questions down, ask, because you don't know what you don't know. And that's just truth. And that's truth for like if you're starting at a new school, a new district, a new grade level, you don't know what you don't know. And you won't know until you ask, because there's just like nobody there who's going to make sure that you know everything. That's your job. And people might just assume that you know things. And so you need to ask if you don't. So definitely, that's probably like number 1. Ding, ding, ding. Big piece of advice. Don't be afraid to ask questions. You won't look dumb. You will just feel more prepared, and you should do it. Next tip, if you already have your job, is just know that on the first day of school, you will not have an Instagram perfect classroom. I will insert a picture of my first classroom here. Definitely not Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube worthy. I don't know, like by the standards that you see, right? But it wasn't completely set up. I didn't have every poster already on the wall. I just kind of had the bare minimum that I needed to get started, and that's okay. By the end of the year, I was so proud of what my classroom looked like because I had student work. I had posters that I had made that year with my kids. We had pictures. I had their birthdays up. I had different resources that I was like, oh, I need some color posters, or oh, I need some posters with this so they know how to spell XYZ. And I was so proud of how my room looked at the end of my first year, but it did not look anything like it did at the beginning. So just know your classroom will probably not be 100% what you want it to look like on the first day, but as long as it's functional for your kids and it has all of the things you need to teach routines and expectations and procedures, you're set. Don't stress. Don't stress over making it look Pinterest perfect on the very first day. Speaking of the very first day, another thing you can start to do over the summer is plan your first day of school down to the hour. I'm talking like, this is the time we walk in the room. This is exactly what I will say. This is exactly what I want the students to do. This is the activity. These are the step-by-step directions for that activity. This is when I expect we'll be finished with the activity, and then we'll do this. Like, plan it out minute, hour, very super detailed. Have a list of extra activities just in case. Odds are you may not get to everything on the first day of school, but if you have that long list and that step-by-step plan, it will be a huge crutch for you on the first day of school, and not in a bad way. Like, I have my plan concrete in my hands because the first day it's like chaos sometimes. Oh, it's chaos. And it doesn't matter how many years you've taught, the first day is chaos. But if you have your concrete plan, at least you can look and say, this is what I was planning to do next, and I know what I'm going to say, and I know what I'm going to teach, even if something comes and throws you a curveball. The next tip kind of goes along with what I shared in the first half. Go ahead and keep all of the resources you make and organize them. Your first year, you'll make a lot of resources, or you'll print and laminate and cut a lot of resources. Everything you make, find a place to organize it. Don't let it sit on the back counter forever. Put it in a bag, label it, put it in your storage container. Like, you will thank yourself your next few years if you do this now, because I made a ton of things my first year that I still use now, and it never fails. I share them in like a vlog or something, and somebody's like, can you link that resource? And I'm like, I can't because I made it 4 years ago and I can't find the link anywhere, or I didn't have the physical copy, or I just have what I organize and what I put away, but I don't have the digital to share. But I'm really glad that I saved those things for myself because I still use materials for my first year of teaching like every single week in my classroom. So save it. Save the worksheets. If you have extras, save them in a file. That way next year you can pull it out and say, this is what I need to copy for this week. Like save, organize, and do it as you go. Don't put it on the back counter because you will forget and you will get confused. And then my very last tip is it will get easier and it will get better. My first year was I don't want to say terrible. I almost said terrible. It was rough. And I just felt like I didn't know what I was doing and it was challenging. And I was like, oh my gosh. Second year, oh my goodness, it was so much better. I knew what I was teaching. I was prepared and I just felt a whole lot more confident. So it will get better and it will get easier with time the more you teach. Everybody has to have a first year at some point in time, so you're not alone. Every teacher's had a first year of teaching before. Just know that it's going to get easier. It's going to get better. Lean on your friends and family. Lean on your coworkers. Ask them for help. And make sure you take time to refuel yourself and try not to take a lot of work home. I did take work home my first year teaching. I'm not going to lie. It was just not avoidable for me. But I would go home and be like, hey, David, you want to cut some laminate? Or I'd sit and I'd watch a Hallmark movie while I planned. I know that sounds corny, but I would make the best of a situation. Or I'd go sit at a Starbucks and say, okay, I'm going to do my lesson planning here because at least this is fun for me. And I just kind of hyped it up. But as you start to make those boundaries between work and home life, and just know that it's going to get easier. It will be overwhelming. It will be stressful, but you can do it. You're going to be a great teacher, and congratulations on starting out your first year. I hope these tips were helpful for you. Again, if you know a first-year teacher, please share this video with them so they can get some tips and ideas to help them feel a little more prepared because I know how overwhelming it can be. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss more of my teaching content. And I would also like to know, what is your biggest piece of advice to a first-year teacher? Something that you wish you had known before you went into your first year. Please drop that in the comments below so that the advice can just keep going. They can watch the video and then scroll through and read all of your advice too. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video. And as always, I will see you in the next one.